The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back for another week of Music Weekly here on the Nerdcast Empire. I am Matt in the studio with you. Great to have you along with us. Another week of talking the best rock and metal releases. This week we will be taking a look at the releases of July the 5th. And some really good stuff out there once again. A lot of diversity in our choices again this week. Really looking forward to this. And the man that just put the playlist in the chat, if you're watching live on Twitch or if you're on the VOD, you can see the link there, is Mike. Mike joining me in the studio once again this week. Mike, how's it going?
It is going. Interesting week in music as always. Can't wait to get into the stuff this week.
Yeah, some really good stuff again. A variety of stuff, which I really enjoy when it's not necessarily all the same thing. I think that makes for a more interesting listen when we're going through the music, so we'll get a chance to get to the music here in just a few minutes. But we're going to start with a few news headlines. Nothing real heavy in the news for rock and metal this week, but just a few notes that people might be interested in. A story from Metal Injection mentioning that a couple of previous solo albums from Alex Lifeson and Geddy Lee, of course, you know them as two-thirds of Rush, they're going to be re-released, so they've teamed up with Anthem Records to reissue the duo's first ever solo albums, Lifeson's 1996 album Victor and Lee's 2000 offering My Favorite Headache. They're going to be released on August the 9th in various formats, including a range of vinyl configurations, so why not? Maybe not cassette, but who knows? Maybe they will be releasing on cassette, but there's going to be some extras added. The fourth side of Lifeson's album is going to have 4 instrumental tracks that were previously just exclusive to his website, while the fourth side of the Geddy Lee album will have 2 instrumental mixes on that album. So, obviously, if you're a big fan of Rush, if you're a big fan of those two, there's a good chance that you're already pretty familiar with their solo stuff, but I think maybe for people who just kind of are familiar with maybe some of the radio hits, I have a feeling that if you're a fan of their big hits, you're going to enjoy the solo stuff as well. It's kind of interesting to see because I'm not as familiar with their solo work, but I have to assume like it's really good stuff.
Yeah, I've not actually listened to Alex Lifeson's solo album. Geddy Lee's, I think I actually downloaded it back in the day before I owned any actual Rush albums. But I'm kind of hoping this is like them kicking the tires on maybe continuing the solo work or just doing anything outside of Rush. Obviously, they're not going to continue that, but I think there's still a lot of music left in those guys, and I think the fans definitely would like to hear more.
I don't think there's any doubt that the fans want more Rush, if those guys want to continue with Rush. Obviously, with Neil Peart's passing, I think the chances of them actually doing any kind of collaborative album is probably not going to happen. I know they've done some playing here and there, but I think a full-blown tour is probably unlikely, although I think everybody kind of holds out hope that maybe, as some sort of like super farewell, they'll come back and maybe do one more tour, bring in some all-star drummers, because there's so many drummers that have been influenced by Peart that I would think there would be no shortage of guys that would want to jump on that tour just to be able to play Rush songs live. In fact, they could probably even pick a bunch of different drummers to join them at different segments of the tour just to pay honor to those guys.
Yeah, if they wanted to do it as some sort of tribute, I could see that. I don't know what their level of interest in that is, though. That'd be a good question.
Those guys are definitely not your average rock and roll guys. No. They're very thoughtful. They're very considerate. I think there are a lot of guys, and we see it every week when we go through these stories, such and such band's back in the studio. This band's got a new whatever. These guys are not those guys. Because if they were, they would have already been out there doing tours, making new albums. I don't think they have any desire for that. But at the same time, if they ever do have any kind of desire for more content, I'm sure the fans are going to scoop that up. And I know these re-releases on the live album, or the solo albums, I should say, will be well thought of, I'm sure, and their fans will certainly flock to those. But
for sure.
Certainly we'll keep an eye on those as those come out, coming up in just a couple weeks, in fact, in early August. Interesting interview. Nothing really groundbreaking here. I just thought this was fascinating because we talk about Megadeth a lot on this podcast, and their drummer, I'm not real sure how to pronounce his last name. Do you know off the top of your head? Verburen?
I think so, yes.
Dirk Verburen, the new Megadeth, or one of the newer Megadeth drummers, just did an interview with Portugal's Look Mag, and nothing like groundbreaking in that interview. The thing that was interesting that I thought was worth mentioning is him talking about something that I think has been speculated for a long time, is that Dave Mustaine has a folder that has everything he's ever recorded and all these riffs that he's created. And of course, he's such a legendary guitarist. He's got them all, and he can reference them. And I think it again just kind of goes to show you that, kind of like we just talked about with the guys from Rush, Dave Mustaine's on a different wavelength, I think, than a lot of these rockers that, you know, to him it's important to have documented all that stuff and kind of be able to call it back. If this, you know, I think this riff I wrote in 1987 would be really good here. I mean, that's just, I don't want to say it's not normal, but I mean, it just kind of tells you how his brain is wired.
I think it's a matter of, okay, I wrote this thing. It sounds kind of neat. I don't know what to do with it for now, but I don't want it to go to waste. So there is always that sense of, I don't think this is worthless. I just have to do something with it in hopes that maybe somewhere down the line it'll kind of jog my memory and I'll go back and revisit it and maybe do something with it. I thought just kind of him going into the writing process that they've been using for this last album specifically was really interesting. Just, you know, here's their drummer talking about how, you know, he wrote some things and put them in their like Dropbox and Dave would check it out and kind of, yeah, I like this. Let's add this to it. Just it sounds so much more collaborative than I think you would have expected Dave Mustaine to ever be. And I imagine he probably hasn't always been this way, and comments from prior band members would suggest that. But I don't know if it's just a matter of he's mellowed out with old age or if he actually does kind of enjoy the collaboration more so than just being a dictator, or if it's just a matter of, I don't want to do all this by myself at this point. Like, it's nice when other people actually carry some of the load.
And of course, you know, we talked about a few weeks ago the fact that they are working on new material that'll be a new album at some point, maybe end of this year, beginning of 2025. And yeah, I mean, I think at some point, like, he's made his hits, he's got his legacy. I mean, Megadeth's going to go down as one of the greatest rock bands of all time. So now it's like, what can you do? Because the one thing Megadeth has always done is bring in some of the most ridiculously talented people, virtuosos in their field. I mean, you can go through the whole list, and almost everybody that's been in or out of Megadeth and for any length of time is just is almost as kind of as ate up on music as Mustaine is, in some cases more so. So at some point you kind of have to look at that and say, hey, I'm bringing in all these really talented guys. Let's let them add some ingredients to this. Let's let them kind of lay it out there, and maybe we'll come up with something that even I can't even dream of, and maybe there's still some great Megadeth to come with these new releases.
And I think that's the interesting thing, too. Like, when they talk to Timu, the new guitarist, is just learning those old parts and trying to get into the head of these just classic guitarists that Megadeth's employed over the years. And it does reflect on the sound. It's, you know, the first couple albums with Chris Poland and Gar Samuelson sound nothing like Rust in Peace. Like, it's still Megadeth, but you can tell that they were coming from an entirely different planet than Marty Friedman and Nick Menza were. But, yeah, I you know, honestly, 10, 15 years ago, when Megadeth would release new music, I would always think to myself, this could be the last album of theirs we get. So the fact that we're still getting music from them is nothing short of amazing.
Well, I was just thinking that too. Like, at Dave's age, like, they could be a greatest hits band now.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, they could just play the hits, and I've never been, you've been to way more Megadeth shows than I have, but they're probably the band I've seen the most, even having said that. I've never been to a bad Megadeth show.
No.
Like, no matter what their set list is, and it's been different every time. They've had different albums. They've been touring. It's never been a disappointment. They always put on a great show, and they could just do that. They've got enough catalog that they could literally play a different set almost every night with what they've got and never have to write another new song. And yet here they are, not only writing new music, but trying to find different ways and different sounds and things that are different at this stage of their career. I mean, we've talked a lot about Motley Crue. We've talked a lot about some of these other bands that are clearly like, All right, we've done what we need to do. Now we're going to use technology to try to come. And
Do it
here's
for us.
the most technology they're using is Dropbox to be able to
Which
transfer.
is about the level that I operate at, so that's pretty impressive for me.
Well, that'll be good in case Dave ever asks you to join Megadeth.
Yeah.
You'll be set.
I'll be
This
ready.
technology.
I can use 2007 era technology.
But yeah, it's great to see. Really interesting story. I put it in the chat. Definitely check that out. Again, excited for new Megadeth stuff. Probably going to come in early 2025. One other quick news story before we take a break was on Blabbermouth's website, and news that legend Steve Howe, of course, member of Yes and Asia, going to be releasing a new album called Guitar Escape in September. It'll be available on CD, vinyl, and digitally. Basically, the article talks about it kind of being a guitar masterclass. It'll feature 14 new instrumental tracks, and Steve plays acoustic, electric, steel, and bass guitars along with keyboards. He'll be joined by his son Dylan on drums. I mean, here's another guy that is an absolute legend.
Yeah.
We just looked it up. He's 77 years old. Another guy who has done it all and could easily, when he feels like touring, go out and just play the hits and nobody would care. And here he is writing this guitar album and playing every type of guitar you can play, being able to play with his son. And I have a feeling when this comes out, again, we talk about instrumentals. I think there are times and places for them. This would be a time and a place that would make a lot of sense. But I get the feeling this is going to be really good.
Yeah, I have no doubt about it. And, you got to think some of that inspiration for him to continue doing this is getting to record and play music with his son. That would be really cool. And I can only imagine how talented he must be if Steve Howe's his dad. So it'd be interesting to hear what this stuff sounds like.
I don't wonder what the pressure of that's like. Like, your dad is a prog guitar legend. He has, just written so many memorable guitar parts that have redefined progressive rock music, especially in the Yes era. And now you're going to be playing drums on this CD, and it's like everybody's going to be, the guitar parts, but like everybody's going to listen to the drums, like, hey, does that sound all right? Like, does that, when you're the son or daughter of a music legend, that's a lot of pressure. I mean, so often we see sons and daughters not necessarily take the same stage name as their famous father or mother just to try to kind of set their own path. So here's an opportunity for him to immediately kind of play. And I have no idea what his son has done, whether he's been in a band or anything like that. But this is pretty cool to be able to do this. And if he's not playing, I have a feeling this is something certainly going to get his name out there.
Yeah, for sure. This is kind of off topic, but something I ran into earlier when looking up information on one of my albums. I ran into these two different websites that had like suspiciously similar headlines on their article about this band. It was really strange. I felt the need to point it out. This MNPR website, their headline for the Mine Road album. Mine Road released their fab new country rocker single, American Dream. Then there was another website, Click Roll Boom. Mine Road released their fab new rocker single, American Dream. New album tomorrow, Sky out now.
Well, I can speak firsthand because I work in the content world. I think a lot of people know, and this is going to be a little off topic for our music, but I think it is kind of relevant in this case. The biggest challenge in content right now, and I write financial content, continue to write it on a freelance basis, is AI websites basically just scraping your stories and scraping your headlines and throwing it on the website, and they get these domains that have domain authority. Sometimes they'll get like, not necessarily .gov domains, but they'll get these higher level domains that hold authority over your website. So the AI version of your article that you actually spent time and money on is ranking over your actual article. I mean, Google is a mess right now. We won't get that deep into the weeds to talk about what a mess Google is. It's really hurting these websites that are producing content. But when I was still working in my previous job, we would see it a lot, but it was very imperfect. they would take paragraphs, 2 or 3 paragraphs of my article and throw it in amongst a bunch of other nonsense. And, my name would show up in there randomly. And it just like the AI didn't understand what it was trying to cut and would just vomit a section of it on a page. And we could usually spot it and tell the people, hey, you need to take this down. This is a lot harder to find because they're finding ways to basically manipulate the system, which is supposed to be against Google's rules. You're not supposed to do that, but that kind of stuff you're going to see a lot more often. Now, sometimes it's just press release rip. Like, press release might have had that headline, press release article, and then everybody, instead of actually writing a new review on it, they just take the press release and spit it right on their website.
You hope that's the case.
That's what used to happen back in the day, and it was understandable because it was a press release. Now, you really should specify, like in the byline, like, hey, this is a release from the band, so that like, hey, the website didn't write this, the band wrote this, or their PR firm. But
yeah, it's just interesting because in both articles they use the phrase. Let's see here. Long-awaited new studio album Tomorrow's Sky with an additional single and video, the fabulous Tom Petty-esque American Dream.
Yeah.
Like, I hope that's from a press release and not just, pilfered from one website and pasted onto the other.
And the best way for those at home, if you come across this and you want to check, you take a sentence like that is so unique and then turn around and paste that sentence back in the Google search bar and see how many results you get and see how many websites have taken that. Because you might find out, like, oh, okay, this actually is a press release. It makes sense. Otherwise, you might find, hey, it's only on here a couple times. Somebody's ripping somebody's content off of that. So it's a problem. There's no question about it. And it's something that gives content producers a major headache. If it ends up being a press release, it's okay.
Yeah.
But, yeah, that's not unusual, unfortunately. And I think we're going to see it more as we continue forward, and it's something that at some point is going to have to be addressed because, and again, there's nothing that it's harmless in a press release about music, but, anybody can write anything and it can get AI'd out into the world, and it looks, it starts to carry authority when it shows up in a bunch of places. In reality, it may be nonsense. So just something to keep in mind.
Well, it's unfortunate if it starts happening to stuff that's behind a paywall.
Yeah.
Because now you're taking stuff that I expect you to pay for, and you're just giving it away to everybody.
Yep, and that's something that is happening, and I think that's something that will eventually... I mean, the problem is it's something like we talk about in our anime show on Thursdays, which check it out again next Thursday. It's kind of like playing whack-a-mole because these sites come and go, they're up, and then they're gone, and so you want to try to go after them, but sometimes it's hard to even figure out who they are to go after them. So it's a mess out there. But
it's a little off topic, but it caught my attention.
Yeah,
earlier. I'm like, that's kind of interesting. I kind of want to get your thoughts on it, just because I know you're more in tune with that world than I certainly am.
It is. SEO people don't get a lot of sleep at night right now because it is a crazy world out there. But just a little inside baseball to how the content world works. So if you see that stuff out there in a Google search, you'll know why that might be. You hope it's something benign like a press release that just got pasted in a bunch of places. Unfortunately, more and more, that is not necessarily the case. So with that kind of wraps up our news segment for today. If you're listening on the podcast version, we're going to step aside for a break. When we come back, we are going to talk about the new music this week on the Music Weekly, and we got a lot of really good stuff. We'll do that on the other side of this time out here on the Nerdcast Empire. Back on the Nerdcast Empire, live on twitch.tv/Nerdcast Empire, or you can catch us on the VOD, which a lot of people do each and every week. Our VOD numbers have been really great. Got more people checking out the VOD than we have followers. So again, I put out that plea. Please, if you're here, you're watching the VOD on Twitch, please drop us a follow. We are continuing to try to push forward to 50 followers at least. We'd like to go way past that, obviously, but that is the first goal for 50 followers. So this week, of course, Music Weekly, as we do each and every week, we talk about the best new rock and metal releases. This time we are talking about the releases from July the 5th. And Mike puts together a list. He already pasted it in the chat. You will see it there. You can obviously go to his YouTube page as well to kind of get that. But every week he goes through, puts together a list. We go through, listen to the music, and we try to pick at least 2 artists out and their album, and then we play a little bit and talk a little bit about them on this show. So Mike's going to get to go first, and he's got 2 picks this week. What do you have for us first?
Absolutely. Kind of got a nice little variety this week. My first pick is actually like a traditional heavy metal band from India, formed in Bangalore back in 1998 by Nolan Lewis and Ganesh Krishnaswamy. The band is Kryptos, and this is their 7th studio album, first since their 2021 Force of Danger. It is Decimator.
Yeah, this is a band that I saw that you had marked in a different color on your sheet. So it's like, I had listened to some of their stuff, and then, it's like, okay, I think you're probably going to pick these guys, so I won't get too deep into this album yet, but these guys have a great sound. It's always cool to feature bands from different parts of the world, and this one coming in from India, and they said they really killed it with this album.
Yeah, I was really impressed with the album. These guys are considered pioneers of the modern Indian heavy metal movement. Always surprising when you run into a band from the late 90s and this is your first interaction with them. We run into that a lot, unfortunately, but definitely glad to have them on my radar now. Like I mentioned before, they're definitely a traditional heavy metal band. They have new wave of British heavy metal and 80s thrash combination to their sound, which works really well. Wikipedia cited their influences as Black Sabbath, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, as well as Coroner, Creator, Merciful Fate, and Candlemass. This band's toured and opened for acts such as Creator, Testament, Death Angel, Catatonia, Sacred Reich, and in 2013 they became the first Indian band to play the Vakan Open Air Festival, which is really awesome.
Yeah.
Going back to their sound, very much classic metal, which I always have a soft spot for, and I think Nolan's vocals suit that style of music really well. Standout tracks for this album, we're talking Sirens of Steel, Fall to the Spectre's Gaze, Electrify, Solaris, which is kind of a slower instrumental that leads into the title track Decimator, which is kind of a cool change of pace for the album. But yeah, these are, if you're into that kind of old school 80s thrash, new wave of British heavy metal, you definitely got to check these guys out.
That's what we're going to do at this time. If you're watching live on Twitch or on the VOD, we're going to check these guys out. Again, this is Kryptos on the album Decimator. We're going to check out the track Electrify. It is the 4th track on this album, so let's check out a little bit of that now and make sure I've got everything where it needs to be. I think so, so let's check it out now here on the Nerdcast Empire. Yeah, you can definitely, the one thing that jumped out even before I looked at any information on this band was that new wave of British heavy metal influence. You can definitely hear that in their music. But like you said, just a straight up classic hard rock band. Like they're coming right at you. It's that just very classic metal, which is, again, it's great that there are bands still out there making this kind of music. It's wild to you always wonder, like, how does this music get into India? Like, to really get that following. It's great to see, and it's not just India. There's lots of parts of the world that we feature on this podcast, and it's cool to see, like, hey, these people love metal and want to continue to do it. And like I said, they just did a great job of it.
Not your typical hotbed for metal, you wouldn't think, but we have seen a couple of bands and artists from there at this point. It's maybe not reinventing the wheel, but the wheel rolls really nicely. So, maybe you don't need to. Maybe you just do what you do really well, and it works. You don't have to throw a wrinkle into it.
I think sometimes, we get both on this podcast. Sometimes we get people that are looking to reinvent the wheel, and they do a really cool job of coming up with something different. But if you do something really well that's classical, and you can knock it out of the park like these guys did, like, absolutely do that. Again, I still have to get through a few more tracks on this album, but what I've heard so far, it's really excellent. If you're a fan of new wave of British heavy metal, or just a classic metal sound, I think you're going to really dig Kryptos. Really good stuff for your first pick this week. As always, you get 2 picks. What do you have for pick number 2?
Pick number 2 kind of caught me off guard. It was one of those instances where the song that I picked for the playlist isn't entirely indicative of what the rest of the album sounds like, but it was interesting enough where I knew I had to hear more because it sounded so different than what we typically encounter on our weekly release list. This is the debut album from the North County, Dublin, Ireland rock band who first came together in 2012. The band is called Mine Road, and the album is Tomorrow's Sky.
Yeah, I really kind of dug this. Like, it was one of those on the playlist that at first I was like, this is really different. Like, and sometimes when it's really different, it isn't good. But I always like to try to give it a few seconds. Like, is this going to get good? And this did. Like, it was different, but it was really great. And this is definitely the most unique thing we have of the 4 bands we picked this week.
Yeah, so kind of getting into it, the song that I picked for the list, which was random, I didn't listen to it first, was the song American Dream, which I kind of referenced in that news story earlier. But it's pretty much a country rock song, like very much not what I would listen to. But hearing it, I'm thinking, is this what these guys really? Is this what the rest of this album's going to be? I'm beyond curious. I want to hear more. And turns out that wasn't really the case. The rest of the stuff feels a lot more straight up rock and roll. Kind of going into the band, like I mentioned, they first got together in 2012. Before kind of getting things going all the way, a couple of the band members immigrated to Australia and the United States for a number of years. It wasn't until 2019 that they all kind of got back together to pick up where they left off. They describe their music as riff-driven music with huge melodies over the top while allowing their more delicate side to show through. I think that's a reasonable enough explanation.
Yeah, I think that is definitely right to the point. I think it definitely describes what their sound is.
So after hearing American Dream, I'm like, okay, I got to check out more of this and see what we have going on. And I jumped into the album. The first track, Snowplow, I was like, wow, these guys definitely rock more than I was expecting after hearing that first track. And even then, you get to American Dream and okay, it's got this country sound. Then they follow it up with Blood on the Floor, which is way heavier and definitely more to my style. After listening to it all, I just kind of felt like this was good, timeless hard rock. Like, it doesn't kind of go into any weird directions too far. Like, it does dip into country a bit at times, but not without it still being rock. The articles that I mentioned earlier kind of referenced it, and I kind of heard it as I listened too. Is if I was going to compare it to anything, I would say maybe Tom Petty.
Oh, okay.
But then there were also times where some of the songs sounded like Load era Metallica. Anytime I started thinking, hey, this is kind of what these guys are like, this is what they sound like, then something else kind of came up where it didn't really sound like that anymore. So they were kind of all over the place, but still just rock music. Standout tracks for me were Snowplow, Into the Storm, American Dream, Blood on the Floor, Tomorrow's Sky, Start to Believe, and the song that I chose to demo here is Into the Storm.
So we're going to check that out now, again, from Mine Road. This is the album Tomorrow's Sky. We're going to check out track number 3, Into the Storm, and let's check that out now here on the Nerdcast Empire.
A fake transition without permission that makes you stand up and listen. When you know the way back home, you walk into the storm alone. When you know the way back home, you walk into the storm alone.
There's definitely like a classic rock vibe to it.
Yeah.
Like, it definitely feels like something that you would have heard on like a station that plays like 70s and 80s classic rock.
And that part there, I almost kind of felt a little bit like The Cult.
Yes.
Like kind of that vibe to it.
I can see that.
It's just, there's little hints of a lot of different things to where once you think you got it figured out, you kind of lose it.
Clearly there's some eclectic tastes influences from in this band that has kind of had them going some different directions. Like you said, the song on the playlist was totally different than that.
Yeah.
But no, I really like a band that can kind of do a lot of different things. Sometimes we get these albums, and it's not a criticism, it's just the reality of it, that a lot of the tracks kind of sound the same. This band definitely not that case. Like
you never pigeonhole yourself.
Yeah.
I think, and I know 2024 it's a little different than the days when you had these bands playing stadiums, and then they would release an album totally 180 from what their original material was like. Like that, we're not really dealing with situations like that, but still, this is a band that I feel like could release about anything, and it's like, okay, that's them, sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely want to check out the rest of this album. You should check it out too. Mine Road with Tomorrow's Sky, Mike's second pick for this week. Just a reminder, if you're listening live, of course, we're on the VODs. You're going to hear these sound clips that we pull, but if you're listening on the podcast version, no sound clips in there, just us talking about these bands. So make sure you try to catch us live on twitch.tv/Nerdcast Empire so you get to hear what these bands sound like. I have two picks this week as well. We are going to Germany this week. We are going to spin the next two picks in Germany. And there was about 4 or 5 bands that I had that were all kind of in that area that like I could choose this band. And it was really tough. Like I listened to several full albums and was still kind of, I would listen to one, then I listened to the next one, like, ooh, that's just a little better. And then I listened to the next one. It was just kind of this process. Finally narrowed it down to 2. Just so happens that they're both from Germany. The first band's a German hard rock heavy metal band founded in 2006. Actually started as a school band. It's the band Kissin Dynamite with Back with a Bang. This is a band that had opened frequently in their early years for Udo Dirkschneider.
Oh.
In fact, Udo Dirkschneider provided vocals on one of their tracks on their Addicted to Metal album. So
that's awesome.
That's pretty cool. The band was named after the AC/DC song of the same name, which isn't too surprising. They won the award for the best German band, even by Metal Hammer Awards in 2018 after being nominated in 2017 and not winning. This album has already actually hit number 1 on the German charts.
Oh, wow.
So it is doing very, very well. This is an album, I think, from start to finish, it's just a lot of fun to listen to. I really, like, you start hearing it, and it's like it just pulls you in. Feels like there's like a hint of sleaze, but not too much. Like, you can tell there's some influences there, but it's not a sleaze album. It's just great heavy metal music, and I really, really enjoyed this. Standout tracks included Back with a Bang, the title track, The Devil is a Woman, and the track we're going to play a little bit of, Raise Your Glass. But this is a lot of fun. I love bands like this, that it's just a great listen, and it goes really quick because the album is just so much fun, and that was Kissin Dynamite as far as the way I saw it. And we're going to check out a little bit of Raise Your Glass there here off of the album Back with a Bang. It's track number 3, and we'll check that out here now on the Nerdcast Empire.
Raise your glass to the memories that we shared, resonated in each song, and the crowd still sings along. Raise it high to the roller coaster ride. Our journey carries on, and the best is yet to come. Here's to every single moment. Raise your glass. The car was packed with stage gear.
And to me, it feels like a band that you and I would have went and saw in concert 10 or 15 years ago. And it's like they're still making this great music. Obviously, they've not been around a whole lot longer than that, but it's just a lot of fun listening to these guys. Curious to get your thoughts on Kissin Dynamite.
Yeah, I definitely get a little bit of that sleaze vibe with them, but it's like ultra polished sleaze to where it kind of ends up becoming Bon Jovi. I think that's probably the best way to describe them I can think of. But yeah, just ultra catchy pop metal music, essentially. I could listen to that anytime.
Yeah, it's just great to listen to. I love their harmonies. I think they just do a great job with that. But again, it's just a fun listen, and that's I love upbeat, fun metal that's clearly, here for a good time, and that's kind of what this feels like. So definitely check out Kissin Dynamite. A lot of people in Germany already number one on the charts, back with a bang, and they certainly are. My other pick, we're staying in Germany, another German band. This is a German power metal band formed in 1996. This is their 9th studio album. It is Orden Ogan with The Order of Fear. It's interesting because the German magazine Rock Hard Magazine, which I thought maybe Juice Robinson might have had something to do with, but did not, as far as I know, called this band the one and only legitimate Blind Guardian successor. So that is some pretty high praise when you're going to throw that out there. But definitely want to post the link. I obviously always post the link in the chat to the playlist for these guys, but I would like to, I'll have to try to find it. The video, check in Mike's playlist and look for the video of these guys, because their video for the song, I believe it was The Order of Fear, was just a lot of fun. Like, clearly it definitely told you what this band was about, and their music definitely, the whole album kind of feels that same way. Standout tracks, My Worst Enemy, Conquest, Moonfire, and of course we're going to listen to The Order of Fear. But another band that I really, really enjoyed their sound, and guys have been doing it for a long time at a very high level, Orden Ogan. And we're going to check out The Order of Fear off of that album. It's track number 2, the title track on the latest release from Orden Ogan. Let's check that out now. What's interesting to me as I listen to this album, I've listened through it twice, is there's a little bit of progressive metal in here too. And of course, some of their tracks kind of bear that out. They have Anthem to the Dark Side, which is 7 minutes and 10 seconds. And they close the album with 8 minutes and 22 seconds, The Long Darkness. So there's a little prog in this metal music from these guys. But it's sometimes these bands can kind of sound like the Viking music where you're going to go into battle, but I don't feel like these guys went too far that direction, which in the end made it an accessible and fun listen. But I'm curious to get your thoughts on this one.
Yeah, and I think that's probably where some of the Blind Guardian comparisons go, where it's definitely over the top and it's very fantasy-ish, but not Viking metal.
Right.
like there's like another level, I suppose, that they don't quite reach or want to reach, I guess. But yeah, this is a band I've been familiar with for a while, but I've never really sat and like given them much of a listen. After checking out this album, I definitely think I need to go back and give them more of a shot. Anytime you have a band being compared to Blind Guardian, who are just royalty of power metal, I think that warrants more of an investigative effort on my part.
Yeah, I figured that line would certainly get your attention, in addition to just listening to the band, which, again, I think this is a really good release. The Order of Fear, Orden Ogan, from the German power metal band. Again, really good stuff. Really enjoyed this as well. If you're listening on the podcast version, we're going to take one final break. When we come back, we're going into the vault, where Mike and I will give you a couple of classic releases you need to check out. We'll do that on the other side of this time out here on the Nerdcast Empire. Back on the Nerdcast Empire, it's Music Weekly once again. The music of July the 5th has been reviewed. Don't forget to check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. Of course, we have a store there. You can listen to previous episodes of the Nerdcast Empire. You can do that wherever you get your podcast. Of course, our VODs stay up on Twitch for about a month, I think. They're also mostly up on YouTube, where the copyright gods haven't taken them down. But the best thing you can do as far as being sure you're going to get to hear the music clips, whether it's rock music or metal music on Sundays or anime music on Thursdays, is to be here live, because That's really the one place you can guarantee that they won't get muted. Speaking of Thursdays, we'll be back on Thursday with another episode of Anime Thursdays. I believe we're going to be watching one of Mike's opening videos, right? Not sure which one yet. He's got a couple that have gone live recently. I know you had one, I think, go live yesterday.
Yeah, the winter 2024 went live just yesterday, and I think I have the full year of 2001 that we haven't really talked about yet, so either of those are certainly doable.
I think those would both be great. I would love to maybe look into that 2001 one because that is such a classic year.
A lot of great songs on that list.
I think I will have more of a strong opinion about the list in 2001 than I will necessarily from the most recent season in 2024. But you'll have to tune in Thursday night to find out which one we pick.
I think annual lists lend themselves better to having feelings. When I'm going through some of these seasonal lists, I might feel strongly about 3 or 4 of the songs, and then the rest of them are like, yeah, they're fine.
Yeah,
they'll end up on my list somewhere.
So that'll be Thursday night, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Join us again for another episode of Anime Thursdays. And then next weekend, we will be back on Sunday for another episode of Music Weekly. The music of July the 12th will be on the agenda, and already seen some interesting names of bands and albums. So it's never boring, folks. So you'll have to tune in next week to see what we choose for our music for July the 12th. That'll be coming up on the Nerdcast Empire. We, of course, are at episode 80, so we're only 20 episodes away from 100, but we will be crossing over the 1-year mark coming up, I believe, next weekend. So
wow.
Big thank you to everybody who's listened to us, anywhere you've listened to us, whether it's on a podcast, whether it's on Twitch, whether it's on YouTube. We all thank you so much, and it's been a fun first year. And really excited to see where it goes from here.
Let's keep it going.
Let's keep it rolling along. So we're going to keep this episode rolling along. We're going to go to the vault now where we're going to talk about some classic releases. And you are continuing through the alphabet, but you are almost done with the alphabet. We are getting to the end, and I imagine the choices get a little harder when you get to the end of the alphabet.
Yeah, it's been a journey, and the letter V, which is where we are now, not a whole lot out there in my catalog under the letter V. That being said, it made the choice pretty easy. Kind of in that early 2000s period, I feel like we had a lot of supergroups that came together where you'd have established singer with members of a separate band kind of joining forces like Audio Slave like. But there was one that I was really excited about when they hit. And that being said, my vault pick is their debut album from 2004. The band is Velvet Revolver, and that album is Contraband.
Yeah, we talk a lot about supergroups on this podcast, and some of them really stretch the name supergroup, and it's like, you're sort of a supergroup. This is a supergroup, no question about it.
I mean, there's essentially the band members from Guns N' Roses and Scott Weiland. First off, it's kind of interesting when you think that's the lead singer they fell into for this supergroup because they're known for being in Guns N' Roses, which had a singer who might have been a little difficult to deal with, and here you had Scott Weiland, who certainly had his troubles as well. But all that being said, this band was started by Slash, Duff McKagan, and Matt Sorum. It was after they performed at a benefit concert for Randy Castillo, who former Motley Crue, among other bands. He unfortunately passed away from cancer, and they were at this benefit concert for him. After performing together, they're like, hey, we enjoy doing this. We should probably keep going with this.
We're still waiting for Chinese democracy at
basically.
this point.
Well, at that point, they had all long since been fired from Guns N' Roses, so it didn't matter a whole lot.
Correct.
But they kept going. Let's see. They brought on a friend of theirs as well. What was his name that I totally forgot off the top of my head?
Is it Dave Kushner?
Dave Kushner. I had his last name. I couldn't remember his first name. He was brought in after McKagan reintroduced him to Slash, who they were apparently school friends back in the day. But they played with him and said, man, this is great. Let's keep this thing going. What I thought was interesting is I seem to recall from back then them kind of having some trials and tribulations as far as finding a lead singer because they wanted that perfect guy that fit the band both vocally but also just kind of personality-wise. They wanted a dude that they could actually kind of gel with. And on Wikipedia, they actually go through the list of the different people who both auditioned or declined to audition for the band. Those who auditioned, we have Steven Chirot from Kick Tracy, Steve Ludwin from Carrie and Little Hell, Todd Kearns from Age of Electric, Sebastian Bach,
Of course.
Yeah, Sean Albro from UPO, Travis Meeks from Days of the New, and Ian Thornley from Big Wreck. Those who declined to audition, Miles Kennedy, which dude's pretty much like a rock royalty lead singer at this point, Ian Astbury from The Cult, and Mike Patton from Faith No More. I would have loved to have seen Ian Astbury front this band, because I think that would have been a pretty interesting fit. Or Mike Patton, for that matter. But Weiland initially turned down joining the band, but he did send them some work that they turned into a couple songs, Set Me Free, and the Pink Floyd cover Money, which hit, and ultimately after STP disbanded, he opted to jump in. But yeah, I mean, this album, Contraband, is like the perfect blend of both. There are some songs where you're like, this sounds like an STP song. Mm-hmm. There's some where you're like, and I think a lot of it has to do with Slash and Duff. You're like, man, this sounds like Guns N' Roses. Like, Slash has this style about his riffing where he's just like, oh, that's Guns N' Roses. Something like Fall to Pieces, like his guitar in that, you're just, this is amazing. I love this. But the album's amazing. Song Set Me Free was featured on the soundtrack to the 2003 Marvel film Hulk. Slither won a Grammy in 2005 for Best Hard Rock Performance. Some of the standout tracks to me were Sucker Train Blues, Do It for the Kids, Big Machine, Fall to Pieces, Set Me Free, and Slither. I did get the chance to see these guys live at Rock on the Range one year, and Weiland and Slash both just have a presence about them. And like when they opened up with Sucker Train Blues, it was an event. It was really cool, and one of the few times that you kind of felt starstruck watching a live performance. It's unfortunate that they only really had the 2 albums and went away, but yeah, this is definitely a really good album and my choice for the vault.
Yeah, I really thought this was a band that was actually just going to be together for a long time. Obviously, didn't work out that way, but yeah, I mean, they were a band that kind of came together because of the different circumstances. Like you said, the guys being fired from Guns N' Roses and STP breaking up, and kind of all just worked at the right time for all of them to be able to produce this album and continue on even beyond that. But really great. Love Velvet Revolver. This album is a great place to start. And I think if maybe this is your first exposure to these guys, if you're a newer rock fan, it'll allow you to kind of open the gate to get back into some Guns N' Roses stuff, some STP. STP is one of my favorite bands. And I think, like you said, there's definitely some hints of both in this album, and I think it's a good way to maybe, hey, if you like this, like, check out these guys, their past catalog of work as well, because it's really great stuff. But yeah, definitely Velvet Revolver, Contraband from 2004 when that one came out. So really good stuff. Everybody should check that out. I'm continuing through the years, which of course means it's that time of the episode where we go through and talk about all the albums I didn't pick from 1987.
There were a lot of really good ones.
There were a lot of really good albums in 1987. I feel good about the one I did pick, but there were some other ones on the table that easily could have been picked, and probably some of them maybe more pop sensibilities or mainstream sensibilities would have gone with one of these other ones. Just some of the albums that didn't make the cut for me in 1987. Def Leppard's Hysteria, obviously
classic,
a huge classic album. Guns N' Roses, speak of them. Appetite for Destruction came out in 1987. Whitesnake's self-titled album, really good stuff there, came out in 87. Kind of more on the pop side, Tango in the Night from Fleetwood Mac. Really good stuff on there too. Not a ton of hits, but Everywhere is one of their big hits. Little Lies. It was kind of their comeback in the late 80s where they got on MTV and they were getting along at least for a little while. So they kind of had some videos. So I think that was a good album. Band we talk about a lot. Halloween. Keeper of the Seven Keys Part 1 came out in 1987. The White Lion album, Pride, came out in 1987. Another really good album with some big hits on there. And then one that doesn't fit our genre, but I had to mention it, was Oceanfront Property by George Strait, because there's some good ones on there. It starts off with All My Exes Live in Texas, Am I Blue, Oceanfront Property. Like, as far as like country albums, that was a pretty big one in 1987.
It's really the heyday of country music, in my opinion.
There's some really great stuff. We could probably do episodes on country music of the 80s, and it would really bring back a lot of great memories. But what I ended up picking was a band that I was admittedly a little late getting to because I kind of got into rock music and metal music a little bit later than most. So of the big four, if you will, I was probably exposed to Metallica first because they were so pervasive.
Everyone was.
Everybody was. And then Megadeth, obviously, because you were a big fan. I got into them. And that's kind of where, the other two bands I knew like hits here and there. The third band I got into was the one that I like, probably on par with Megadeth. And that's Anthrax. And we had the chance to see them and Megadeth and Slayer up in Columbus. And that was the first time I'd seen Anthrax live. And they absolutely blew me away. I just could not get over how good they were. And we had a chance to see them again after about 50 opening acts in a venue. But I was just totally blown away by these guys. So you get more into their music. And that's why this week we're going to be talking about their album Among the Living, released in March of 1987. This obviously is, I think, probably their most important album. This was the album that basically got them deemed part of the Big Four by a journalist, and something that I think everybody just kind of accepted from there on. But it's just, there's not a bad song on this album, but there are just so many catchy metal hits. And some people think this may be one of the best thrash albums ever produced. And the first side, I mean, you've got Among the Living, Caught in a Mosh, I Am the Law, NFL, if you will.
Nicofessin.
Yes. And then A Skeleton in the Closet. And then you come back with Indians, One World, ADI, Horror of It All, and Imitation of Life on side number 2. Technically, I guess, the singles off that album were just I Am the Law and Indians, but that really doesn't do it justice because like I said, there really isn't a bad track on this album. Album went gold. Very well reviewed from most of the websites on the Wikipedia page. But again, that was Don Kay in 1988 in the British magazine Kerrang that dubbed the Big Four alongside Megadeth, Metallica, and Slayer. And that kind of made them. It was in the top 500 heavy metal albums of all time book in 2004 at number 49. There's a whole bunch more accolades if you go to the Wikipedia page to talk about how great this album is. But it kind of put them on the map as far as, I mean, they were always really good, but this was kind of the thing that kind of threw them up in the stratosphere of thrash music, I should say. So I think that's why this makes sense as the pick. Very important for kind of the music we talk about each and every week. So everybody should definitely check out Anthrax's Among the Living. Your thoughts on this one?
It's always a little surprising, unfortunately, when you start looking at Anthrax's catalog, when you look at the sales, because you wonder why this didn't sell greater than it did. Because as far as anything that you could label thrash, it's about as accessible as you can get. Joey Belladonna is undoubtedly the best singer of the Big Four.
Yes.
You can have your preferences, but the man is a good singer. Like, everyone else just happened to be there and they sang, like almost as if that was a last resort. But this guy, you go to like their album of covers that they did, and just some of the songs that he pulls off, you're just like, yeah, this guy's amazing. I'm really surprised there weren't more singles. Like the title track, Among the Living, great song. Caught in a Mosh, great song. That's really surprising to me. But yeah, I think maybe because of some of the sales numbers and just it's hard to say tumultuous history, because I think ultimately they've probably had less members than some of the other bands. But I think sometimes what sidetracked them or derailed them just seemed like bigger issues or bigger hurdles than like Megadeth ever went through.
Yeah.
You think of like the John Bush era, which I think he's a great singer too, but it just, Metallica and Megadeth or Slayer, they never really experienced that. And I think for that reason, sometimes people kind of see these guys as like the little number 4 of the big 4. But their catalog has a lot of great music, and this is probably their best album.
Yeah, and if you've never seen these guys, like, you have to go see these guys. If you're a fan of metal, like, and you haven't seen Anthrax, you're missing out. I mean, I would say the same thing about Megadeth. Like, the 2 shows we saw Anthrax were phenomenal. Couldn't have been any better live. And I think probably having, like you said, the best lead singer of the big 4 helps, because he sounds just as good live as he does on an album. And I think that carries you a long way. And I don't know if that hurt them in the metal community. Like, if they were a little too, I don't say popish, because that's way too far, but it's just they're almost maybe not as gritty as the other ones. Because obviously, like, Slayer is, like, really gritty. Like, I have a hard time getting into Slayer. It's a little too far for me. I understand why they're popular. Megadeth, Metallica, a little less gritty, a little more mainstream. Obviously, Metallica, very mainstream.
Yeah.
Megadeth, a little less so. But, the other thing, too, you mentioned the problems they went through with, the lead singer and all that. I don't know if because Metallica and Megadeth had commercial success, and Slayer to a little bit lesser degree, had the commercial success that kind of gave them, like, they got the reputation, they got the big commercial success. Anthrax just never, like you said, this album should have been a huge seller.
I think another issue, too, is that when you look at the other 3 bands, when you talk about who kind of runs the band, it usually runs through, at least in some part, the singer.
Yes.
Dave Mustaine is undoubtedly the leader of Megadeth.
Yeah.
James Hetfield is one of the leaders of Metallica. There's no doubt about that.
Right.
And you would say the same about Tom Araya and Slayer. He and Kerry King, and they're probably, certainly at this point, with Hanneman no longer with us, they're kind of the main dudes, or they were, in Slayer.
Right.
I don't think Belladonna ever really got that kind of billing within the group of Anthrax. I don't think they ever saw him as that guy that kind of is on that level with everybody else.
It's a shame, really.
Because, when they replaced him with Bush, I feel like they kind of maligned him in a lot of ways, where, like, now we have this real metal singer. I mean, they even released an album, The Greater of Two Evils, which was basically John Bush singing a bunch of their classic hits that Belladonna was on. Don't get me wrong, it's a great album, and he does a really good job on those songs, but in a way, it was kind of denying your own history.
Yeah, and I think, Joey Belladonna deserved better, and it probably set Anthrax back as far as, again, like you said, just getting to that next level of mainstream acceptance that kind of puts you. Don't get me wrong; these guys have had a great career. I certainly don't want to get it twisted, but like you said, to not be considered the little 4, to be right alongside those other bands, it felt like that was kind of the moment where that kind of jumped off the tracks a little bit.
It was probably bad timing, both with getting rid of Belladonna, and then also with Bush joining at around the time when people stopped kind of caring about heavy metal.
Yeah.
So they also tried to take their sound in a little more, modern, like, not so much new metal, but definitely not like their typical, like, 80s thrash sound. And I think that probably hurt them as well.
Yeah, I think you're probably right about that. But like I said, if you're not familiar with Anthrax, I can't encourage you strongly enough to go check out Among the Living. Great album, and it definitely will get you in the door to what is still today a really great thrash band that's still out there. Still just awesome to see live for sure. But that is going to wrap things up for this edition of Music Weekly. Another great week of music. Big thanks to everybody for joining us for what has been a really good week of rock and heavy metal. More diversity as far as our picks. Again, just different sounds, which makes it a lot of fun. It's not the same thing for 4 bands or 6 bands. A lot of really cool stuff. So hopefully you found something in there. If not, of course, you can check out Mike's playlist and find something on there you like, because there's a ton of songs on these lists each and every week. So big thanks to Mike for putting this together each and every week. Big thanks to Stove Lake Media for their continued support of our podcast. Big thanks to Chris for holding down the chat for us tonight. Big thanks to everybody joining us live, and we're on the VOD. We really do appreciate your support, and if you're here and you're not a follower, drop us a follow while you're here. We would really appreciate it as we continue our goal to get to 50. Again, Anime Thursday is coming up on Thursday, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, U.S. time. And then, of course, 1 week from right now, we'll be back with you for another episode of Music Weekly with the music of July the 12th. That's going to wrap things up for this week. For the entire crew, I'm Matt saying so long. Don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.